I grew up here in the greater Seattle area. I came out when I was very young. I discovered that I was queer at about 4 years old, and I, at the time, was having all of these feelings about people in general that didn't really have gender specificity to it, and I was introduced to the terms gay, lesbian, and bisexual around that time, and I was like, oh, bisexuality, that must be it, and so I came out. Coming out at the age of 5, nobody really believes you. But my mother was a little like, oh, okay, we're gonna roll with this. And I was going to an alternative elementary school in Seattle, and I started receiving some really interesting bullying there. Because again, this was about 10 years ago, and in elementary school in specific, there was absolutely no way that people could actually fathom what this was going on, so there was no support of any kind for the teachers to help deal with these issues for the students. I was called a lesbo, I was called bi. Coming up, having third graders trying to come up with negative terms for bisexual was interesting. So I was called all sorts of things, but they were all had negative connotations. And I remember a particular instance where our bathrooms were repainted, and kids decided that graffitiing them would be a good idea after it was being repainted. And so they were scratching things with paint, and they were scratching all sorts of negative things about other people. And about half of the bathroom walls were about me and my sexuality. And our principal decided to mention this and get us stopped in a public forum. So he chose the lunchroom. And in elementary school, all kids eat lunch at the same time. So I was sitting in a room full of 9 kids, having a great day, and he stands up to start talking about this and how this is a major issue, and we're trying to keep a safe environment for everybody and a beautiful environment so everybody can coexist together, and you should hear some of the things that are being written on these walls. Let me read them to you. And I sat there, and I heard him list off verbatim all of the things that were on the bathroom walls, and I felt myself getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and every eye of my ears turned on me. And I just kind of remember thinking, there went that socialist I was looking for. There was no possible way that with such a public space and the fact that I was already seen as the weird kid, there was no chance for me. I had no way to redeem myself in the eyes of my peers, which that time was the most important thing in the universe. So I, at that time, in about 3rd grade, decided to go back in the closet because I didn't want to deal with it anymore. I wanted friends. I wanted a life. I wanted to be able to exist at school. And again, because it was in about 3rd grade, people sort of forgot about it. There were plenty of other things to tease me about. And in about 6th grade, it started coming back again. I was at the same school. We were at K-8, and there was this huge resurgence. I think everyone's hormones hit. And they're like, oh yeah, that's a hormone. And it got really bad. It was being targeted every single day, not only for my sexuality, but anything that related to me as a hormonal person. It had to do with my weight. It had to do with my sexual activity. It had to do with my intelligence. They were all contradictory. I was fat, therefore I was slut, like you get on girls who didn't want me to. It didn't make sense. But it was pervasive, and I was going through a bunch of hormonal changes, and school was getting really difficult, and I had no support. And it got to the point where my stress level was so high that my body started rejecting food, and I started vomiting. And it got to the point where I was vomiting everything that I ate, and I was dehydrated, and I had malnutrition, but I couldn't stop. And when it got to the point where I was vomiting every 45 minutes, whether there was anything in my body or not, that I finally started telling my mom what was going on. And she had already known, but we had this incredible moment where she was supportive of me and told me, very similar to Jamie's mom, she said that she was going to do all that she could and that she would help me and get me out of this situation and homeschool me. And so that was what I held on to, and it turned out that we couldn't homeschool for a while. And so I had to go right back into that. And the bullying continued, and the harassment continued. And at that point, my body was still really wonky, and I didn't know what to do. And my grades were dropping, and I still didn't have friends. And suicide was the only thing that looked like an option. It had to be better than what I was going through. I wanted everything to just stop. And again, Jamie's story kept hitting me on a personal level because it had a lot of similarities to mine. I took a bunch of pills and wound up in the hospital. And at that point, I looked up at my mom and I said, if you make me go back to school on Monday again, I will not be here by Friday. I will find a way to kill myself within this week. And that scared her enough that she realized that she had to find a way. And so we pulled me out of school in the middle of the year and started homeschooling me. And due to some other circumstances, I was going to a counselor, and through that counseling and being out of that really toxic situation of school, I discovered that life is worthwhile, and that I'm worthwhile, and that my individuality and my sexuality and my knowledge of myself are not things to be belittled, are not things to be harassed for, but things to celebrate. And through that, I found out that I really am. I like girls and boys and things I don't have terms for yet. And yeah, and I was so excited. I really wanted to find a rooftop to go shout from. And it was one of the most beautiful moments of my life, was releasing all of that and kind of saying fuck you to the kids that I went to school with, because it didn't matter. I am, and I was free. Since then, I got found the free community in Seattle, and I have worked in it for several years and discovered a bunch of new things about myself in that regard. I identify as pansexual, which kind of ties back to when I was very young, not identifying with any particular gender that I'm attracted to, but all-encompassing. And I found the trans and genderqueer communities and have worked on my allyship in that regard for a very long time, and lobbied and got my first job there, and have been speaking on these panels ever since. And I think that this film is a really interesting representation of a path that you can take, but as the end of the film said, I've never taken action against that school because I don't know that it would do any good. And I've spoken to that principal since then, and they've denied that ever happened. And that still kind of hurts.